Casey, going on. Ready? Wait, lunch. Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Calling the Honolulu Police Commission meeting to order. Today is March 3rd, and it is now 2:00 p.m. We're here live at the Honolulu Police Department in the conference room on the ground level. Today here joining us, we have Commissioners Chin, Okinaga, Vice Chair Gibson, myself, Chair, Commissioner Perry, and Commissioner Broderick present in the meeting room, as well as HPC staff and Corporation Counsel, Haley Chi and Dwayne Pang. Present on WebEx, if I could ask Chief to introduce who is with her, as well as the officers joining us.
We have Deputy Chief McCarthy, Deputy Chief Takasaki Young, and legal advisor, senior legal advisor Lynn Uema in the room, and then all of the assistant chiefs except for Assistant Chief Vanek online.
Thank you very much, Chief. And if I could just ask the volume be put up just a little bit. Thank you. Pursuant to the 18th Supplementary Proclamation issued by Governor Ige, an emergency order issued by Mayor Rick Blangiardi on February 9, 2021, we are observing social distancing requirements related to COVID-19. We are prohibiting public entry into the meeting room, but we are receiving public testimony, not only written, but also via telephone. We would like to confirm quorum at this time.
Madam Chair, you do have quorum.
Thank you very much for that confirmation. If everyone would just indulge me for 1 minute, I just wanted to make a statement. Before we start today's meeting, I just wanted to take the opportunity to recognize the celebration of women this month. March is Women's History Month, and just so happened, today is also Girls' Day. So happy Girls' Day to all the girls. Yes, the saying goes, lucky we live Hawaii, this beautiful state where a woman can be a police chief, where a woman can be a police officer, where women serve in leadership roles in executive boardrooms and as executive chefs, and where a woman can be a part of this body, the Honolulu Police Commission, where a woman once held the highest office in state government and where they also represent us in Congress. However, one cannot help to recognize that even with women in positions where important decisions can be made, they still get criticized by peers, by the media, and by other enthusiasts as maybe too soft, too accommodating, having too much empathy, and the list can go on. But still, women persist and continue to persevere with professionalism, integrity, and with their heads held high. And with that, one question they may ask is why we must even celebrate Women's History Month. But one can only wonder whether it is because women still continue to have to prove themselves and their worth and make points in an unfettered way. I leave you with this quote by the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who said, "Women belong in all places where decisions are being made. It shouldn't be women that are the exception." So with that, I just wanted to recognize this month as Women's History Month and say happy Girls' Day as well. Thank you for that. At this time, we'll be accepting public testimony, and we have been notified that Mr. John Fielding will be joining us by telephone, which we'll ask the staff to do at this time.
Hi, it's John.
Hi, John. My name is Shannon Olivato. We're here live at the Honolulu Police Commission meeting. Is this a good time?
Yes, it is, except for they're going to hand me my takeout order in just a second, but other than that, I'm prepared to talk.
Okay, great. Just let us know if you have to pause. We'll be happy to accommodate you. I just wanted to let you know that we have received your written testimony and have distributed it among the members. It will also be included in our minutes once it does get published. So go ahead, Mr. Fielding.
All right, well, aloha everybody. Aloha honorable members of the Honolulu Police Commission. My name is John Fielding. I come to you today as a concerned citizen. I have been active in my church, the Cathedral Basilica of Our Lady of Peace, which is located at the top of 4th Street Mall, for the past 18 years. I am the hospitality minister as well as the safety and risk minister for the church. I am also the founding board member of the Catholic Church's homeless ministry called Hope Services. as well as the Boy Scout Master for the Cathedral. I've never before seen such a blatant disregard for law as I have seen as of late. Drug dealers, druggies, homeless, graffiti taggers, purse snatchers, and vandals, and all other forms of criminals have taken over the area outside my church. I have personally managed and monitored as well as swept these people from our property, but they are keen to the law and are now populating the area owned by the city and county. I've been assaulted, I've been yelled at, I've been spat at, I've been threatened by those under the influence and by those who are selling the drugs. I'm not afraid, for God is on my side, but I am tired. I don't know who else to go to or where to go or who to ask for help, except for you. I realize the majority of these issues lie in the directive by the prosecuting attorney's office on the type of crimes that will be prosecuted under COVID. I realize by speaking to dozens of officers, another problem lies with the lack of cases the prosecuting attorney's office actually prosecutes. I am aware that up to 70% of all crimes are not prosecuted because the prosecuting attorney's office only wants those crimes that they are guaranteed to win at trial. Excuse me. I am also aware of the obstacles that start with the intake prosecutors who, with their unwillingness to allow your officers to do their jobs, make it more difficult for them to arrest somebody. Now, this is all unfortunate because as a citizen, when these crimes occur, we feel victimized, we feel demoralized and depressed. Your officers are who we see. Your officers are who we depend on. Your officers are who we give our trust and faith in. And when nothing comes to fruition, it's your officers that we tend to blame. I pray that you have read my statement as I have outlined in more details my plight as well as my recommendations. Chief Ballard, if you are sitting there, I would love the opportunity to speak with you in person, if and when you have the opportunity to do so. Together, we may be able to reach the ear of our new prosecutor, Steve Wong, and make him realize just how broken things are, especially with the time with them, and also how it adversely affects your officers. I pray that you've read my statement, and hopefully we can move forward with that. I would be more than happy to answer any questions because it's just getting to the breaking point, and I appreciate all your time and the opportunity to speak with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fielding. I'm going to ask other commissioners if they have questions for you.
Sure.
And looking around the room, I see none, but I just wanted to thank you for your work in the community as well as with the Boy Scouts. We do have your written testimony. It outlines some recommendations, which we will be sharing with the department. But I think this will be a continued conversation. We did see some of the coverage you had in the media as well. So if you will, just please keep in touch with us. We will be responding to your testimony as well in writing.
And when may I look forward to hearing back from somebody?
From the commission, we usually try to turn it around within the week of our meeting that we hear from the public.
Okay.
But I do encourage you to.
Also, I know I emphasized it on my letter, but a majority of your police officers are doing a good job. There's a few of them, and it's interesting because your officers know exactly who they are, who are the ones that are making or giving the police department a black eye. And every time I ask them, they know exactly who I'm speaking of. So, it's interesting that nobody within the police department themselves want to bring this up to higher ups' attention. So please work closely with your officers, listen to them. And I'm doing this because the prosecuting attorney's office turned a blind eye on me. And rather than assuming the responsibility, they told me to call you as a solution for their problems. And that's why I'm here today.
Thank you, Mr. Fielding. Commissioner Broderick has a question or comment for you.
I just want to make sure we're all clear. The gentleman's going to receive a letter from the commission acknowledging his letter, but not necessarily speaking to the substance of his complaints. Is that correct?
I would think we would have to deliberate on that, but yes, our normal response would be to acknowledge the letter and perhaps provide guidance where he could address some of his concerns. But just to your point, with respect to officers you may have encountered that have exhibited questionable behavior, Mr. Fielding, you know about our complaint process, right? I don't know if you know about it.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do.
But I appreciate you just, outlining some of the concerns in your letter and open testimony as well.
So thank you very much. Please read the letter. I appreciate it. Mahalo.
Thank you, Mr. Fielding. No further questions from anyone in the room. We're moving on to further public testimony. At this time, staff, do we have any?
No.
No further public testimony. We do have written testimony that we wanted to acknowledge. It appears that the prosecutor's office did have notice about a potential testifier with respect to the subject of holding of certain suspects. We have received a letter from Prosecuting Attorney Alm's office, which if those don't object, if I could just read a paragraph from that letter. Seeing no objection, the letter is dated March 1 to our executive officer, Mr. James Ewan. The second paragraph, and this letter will be available for the public with the minutes as well, but I'll go on. The HPD and the Department of the Prosecuting Attorney have had a decades-long agreement that HPD will hold individuals suspected of committing certain crimes for up to 48 hours, as allowed by law, to allow prosecutors to work with HPD, evaluate the evidence, and file charges against them. This allows us to protect the public by keeping dangerous suspects off the street. Those whom HPD does not believe pose an immediate danger to the public are released pending investigation. This does not mean that these suspects will not be charged at a later date. To be clear, the Department of the Prosecuting Attorney will look at filing charges against any suspect, regardless of the type of offense, if there is admissible evidence proving beyond a reasonable doubt that the suspect committed a crime. There is no policy stating that the department will not file charges for certain crimes. And it's signed by Prosecuting Attorney Steve Alm. With that, any discussion with regard to Prosecuting Attorney's letter? Seeing none, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Not a question about that, but maybe administration.
Oh, yeah.
So I know watching the media coverage, I think HPD issued a statement as well in response, so maybe for the benefit of those who didn't see the full coverage. I believe so, or if they have a response. I mean, just any comment or.
Chief, I don't know if you heard Commissioner Okinaga, but does the department have any response with respect to this letter from the prosecuting attorney or Mr. Fielding's concerns?
We all do the best we can. I think another issue is also with the judiciary system, and I think that might be one of the areas where people are just released for ROR, released on their own recognizance, back on the road, especially misdemeanor type cases. Maybe not necessarily felonies, but they're down in our cell block, and then the judges come down and they look through the list and they release a lot of people back out instead of holding them on misdemeanors. So I think it's a three-way street. It's not just a two-way street or a one-way street. It's not just HPD. It's not just the prosecutors. It's not just the judiciary. I think it's the three-legged stool, and I think we can all do better in trying to make the community safe.
So, sorry, Chief, one follow-up question is, so I couldn't understand if it's a COVID-related three-way street that has been, so in other words, it's exacerbated by COVID or it's caused by COVID. I couldn't understand from Mr. Fielding. He seems to say it's getting worse.
This was even occurring before COVID.
Yeah. So, but the experience that Mr. Fielding is talking about specifically in that one area, I think, is what the inquiry is about, whether it's getting worse in that it's impacting specific areas during COVID more than others, maybe. I guess that's what
Well, because obviously the courts are shut down as well. So, you can't hold these people, without them being able to get a fair trial. So if the courts aren't open and can't hold trials and cases, then of course there's going to be people who are released, and then when it's time for them to go to court, I guess they'll get a summons to come to court. So I'm sure with COVID, it has gotten worse because of the lack of holding court.
Chief, with Mr. Fielding, do you think these are the same people over and over, or what is your feeling on that? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that it is the same people. We arrest people, and we have people who have rap sheets that are hundreds of times that they've been arrested, and they're still out on the streets. And it's not just this is part of a whole bigger problem. And once again, this is my soapbox, but it's not just about criminal justice. It's not just about police. It's not just about prosecutors. It's not just about the judicial system. This is about our society. These are the people who are out there. They're the ones that need help, either with mental illness or because of drug-related mental illness or just drug use. They need to get the help that they need. And until we get the resources that are available and get these people off the street and into treatment and then follow up from there, I just don't see things getting any better.
Commissioner Chin has a question or comment?
Hey, Chief, putting aside the policy considerations, maybe another way to look at the complaint from Mr. Fielding is that he's talking about a certain location. So in other words, he's saying in this area next to my church, there's a lot of activity going on, and I'm frustrated about that. Is the department, or will the department be taking any extra steps to kind of increase surveillance in that area, or be putting more scrutiny just to kind of address the citizen complaint about higher crimes being witnessed in that area?
Well, I mean, if the officers don't witness it themselves, there's really not much that we can do. Just because they're homeless and they're sitting on a sidewalk or whatnot, we can't just take action. So we have the number of people that we have when we have Fourth Watch. They walk down there. But as far as increasing, patrols, there's not going to be an increase of number of people because we just don't have the staffing to do that. We'd have to pull them from another area. But once again, if there's a crime that's being occurred and there's a victim, then of course we encourage the victim to call 911 and and of course they will need to prosecute, which now we get back into the criminal justice system again. We arrest them, they get processed, and then they're released, and then it starts all over again.
Okay, well, I mean, Chief, I was just trying to throw you a softball, but I guess it sounds like you're not going to be doing anything extra for Mr. Fielding, but I guess that's fine. Thank you.
No, that's not what I said. I said we will continue to do our patrols down there, and if someone witnesses a crime, then they need to report it and also to be willing to prosecute. So yes, there will be the officers are down there making regular patrols of the area, but we just can't push people off the sidewalks for no reason.
All right, thank you for your clarification, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. And I guess that's a hard part that we find ourselves in, is because we request participation before the Honolulu Police Commission, but when they do come, we don't necessarily have a solution for them or anywhere to guide them, in getting towards their solution. This is something, like you said, it's a societal issue. It's something that not only we need to be taking up, but the individuals that are being victimized may need to, step it up a bit. And it appears that Mr. Fielding's already doing that. So I just want to recognize his willingness to come forward, express this, and bring it to the community's attention, because I don't think he's alone. It's not only within that area that he's talking about, Fort Street Mall. It's everywhere. So I appreciate the acknowledgement of this more societal issue, but it is something that we all gotta step up and take responsibility for some way or somehow. So with that, just moving on to more public testimony. We have received written testimony also from a Kylie Akiona. She wrote to the commission expressing frustration because there's 3 issues she actually raised. One was with respect to officers and their requirement to wear masks. She asked why officers are not wearing masks. She also mentions why we at the commission may not be having our masks on at all times. What I did recall at our last meeting on February 17th, that question came up to Chief Ballard as well by Commissioner Perry with respect to the officer's discretion to use their masks, whether it impedes in their ability to respond. So that would probably apply to Ms. Akiona's question on that. The other thing she articulated was with respect to written testimony and when it could be submitted up to. She expresses that she thought that the commission would be receiving testimony 24 hours in advance of the meeting. But I think what happened was when she did write in the last meeting, she didn't identify it as testimony. Sometimes we get letters. So I think that's what we would need to clarify with anyone writing to the commission with respect to whether we should treat it as testimony or just written communication. And lastly, she asked with respect to closed captioning and or interpreters availability for police commission meetings. And we thank her for raising this as a concern because as you know, that was one of the hurdles I think the commission was looking at when we actually were trying to bring this meeting via YouTube because it was very difficult. We had, initially, if you guys recall, TVs outside the station accommodating the public, but of course that was not enough. So when we did bring it to this forum on WebEx, one of the concerns was that it would not be accurately closed captioned. However, if you notice on our agenda, we do indicate that if there is accommodation necessary, that you contact the commission office in advance so we can set it up. So that is something that we will look at as well. And we just thank Ms. Akiona for her concerns that we brought our attention to. Any questions or comments with respect to Ms. Akiona's communication? Thank you very much, everyone, for your indulgence. Moving on, we'll go to Chief of Police report. Chief Ballard.
Okay, I'm gonna start out, we'll do the body worn camera presentation that we didn't have time for last time, so Chief Takasaki Young will be doing that.
Thank you. And for everyone's reference, within the commission meeting, we do have a handout, but it may have been updated by Deputy Chief Takasaki Young, so we'll be provided with an updated version after this meeting. Thank you, Deputy Chief. Go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon, Commissioners. Just to let you know the premise of this presentation, I believe we're asked to provide how the department is addressing, I would say BWC or body worn camera activation issues per se. So in 2020, the department conducted 45 related investigations pertaining to issues of body worn camera activation issues. 35 were generated from internal complaints. And when I say internal complaints, there were complaints generated from within the department, not outside community members or personnel. So it was primarily done through reviews of deployments. And when I say deployments, it just doesn't include actual deployments of the taser or conducted electrical weapon itself, but also displays, which we do get a lot of. Motor vehicle pursuits, we do have a clause in our policy saying that they have to activate it during the course of the pursuit, and other administrative investigations, which could be any type of other internal complaints generated to address misconduct. And a result to address that misconduct, there are noticeable or possible violations of body-worn camera activations. 10 were generated via external complaints, and as far as you guys know, that was done via HPC referrals, which we've been receiving. Those are sent down to the divisions to look into the matter, as well as notarized complaints. So a member of the public can complain about officer misconduct, and when we look into it, we find a procedural violation pertaining to body-worn cameras. It'll be addressed via an investigation. So 45 total in 2020. This has resulted in 65 officers being investigated. So the question might be, why do we have 65 officers investigated compared to 45 investigations? Because there are several investigations that involve more than one officer. So as a result, 39 received corrective action. When I say corrective action, from the divisional counseling on up, as well as 9 not sustained. The not sustained could have been, we looked into the matter and it determined that their they either did activate their camera or there are situations that require them when the situation posed it to be dangerous or it requires a safety issue for the officers. Yes, non-activation at that point is feasible. However, they should activate it when the situation is non-dynamic. And of the 65, 17 officers are still being looked into for BWC issues. So things that we are doing or looking into doing is one aspect is the retraining aspect. We're looking into developing online training to reinforce the policy requirements, as well as in annual recall training or supervision training. Major Mike Lambert is looking into developing or incorporating BWC activation into scenario-based training. So when we have a functional skills type retraining during our annual recall training, whether it's the tactical driving, control and arrest tactics, or even our police officer survivals training, not only are they going to be engaging in scenarios with each component, but they're also going to be equipped with a body-worn camera. So when they go through the scenarios, they're going to be required to activate the camera. So when it comes to, say, retraining, the recruits will also get it early on in their academy so they can begin that muscle memory. I'll give you an example. When I came into the academy, they used to give us all of our tool belts, but we didn't have obviously our firearm tool went through our training. So during the course of the training, they would give us a rubber gun, we'd put it in. So it'll teach you how to draw, manipulate the holster, and get that muscle memory early. So for recruits, when they go through the scenarios, they're gonna be equipped with it early on, so they're used to that muscle memory. And every year, the patrol lineups, what we do is now we have a standardized patrol lineup. Patrol lineups are very short briefings prior to the workday of a patrol officer. Standardized lineups mean every week, every patrol element gets the same type of retraining. So for the body-worn camera activation reinforcement, they're gonna have it every 3 months. And we started this in-service training, I believe, at the end of December of 2020. Training, I would say, is one component, obviously, to address this. And what I want to say about that is we did have the body-worn cameras for, since 2018, 17, 18 or so. But what I want to bring to light is, as a patrol officer, when I first came in, we didn't have mobile data computers. Everything that we got sent to was by the police radio, and we had to handwrite everything down. So when you would get dispatched to a call, whether if it's the street address, a telephone number, a description of people we have to look for, we all have to write it down. When the mobile data computers came up, everything that the dispatcher gave you was available on the screen, modern technology. But of course, coming into, say, muscle memory, I was still used to just asking everything over the radio when everything was actually available on the computer. So it took some time for some of us to actually get used to it. That is not an excuse, but when it comes to retraining is an important aspect of getting these officers back getting into the habit of activating their BWCs. So that's one element, is the retraining element. The other aspect I want to bring up is called random reviews. So random reviews is starting this month. Every element that has been issued body-worn cameras, they will be reviewing 10 randomly selected cases that they would have to go through and determine whether or not body-worn cameras were activated or not. In the instances where body-worn cameras were activated in violation of policy, corrective action will be taken against the officers, which may result, like I said, from a divisional counseling. If obviously they received a minimum form of discipline, corrective action, as you know, would may result in further progressive nature. And the last one I want to bring up is a body-worn camera signal device. So when the department purchased the body-worn cameras, part of the package included a signal device which could be installed in the vehicle. So what we're looking at is installing it after our deployment of District 4 and traffic, is having these body-worn camera signal devices installed into the vehicles. From what I understand, it's the size of a deck of cards. It get installed within the vehicle. And what the signal would do is, based on the parameters, if you opened your door, or if you turn on your lights and sirens, that signal device would activate your camera on its own, so the officer wouldn't have to hit it or activate it themselves. So once we roll out, like I say, the body-worn camera for the remaining districts, District 4 and traffic, and we started with the traffic division at the end of February or last month. We're trying to near our completion or goal date of March to roll it out for the uniform elements that would require body-worn cameras. So that concludes the presentation. Do you have any questions?
Yes, any commissioners have questions for Deputy Chief Takasaki Young?
Chief, do you intend to roll out the cameras to detectives, for example, or any non-uniformed officers?
Yes, I believe the chiefs mentioned before that we are looking at equipping our plainclothes units with body-worn cameras. Obviously, it comes down to, do we have enough cameras? And if we don't, can we secure enough funding? Yeah. And as well as the cost for service, the big cost is to maintain the storage of the videos. So we are definitely looking into equipping our plainclothes officers with BWCs as well.
Yes, Commissioner Broderick has a question.
Chief, thanks for the presentation. I know there are a number of reasons for the cameras. I just wanted to talk very quickly about how helpful they are for the commission. I would say that in maybe half of our cases, either the police officer didn't have a camera or they didn't turn it on. And in those cases where the camera was turned on, it's almost always determinative of what we decide. In other words, the camera gives us exactly what we needed to know. So I just wanted to emphasize from the police commission's perspective how valuable it is for us to have the cameras turned on.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Just one, when is that last shipment coming, please?
Commissioner Gibson, are you talking for the BWC signal device or the remaining traffic and District 4?
And about how many cameras is that? Is that a significant number?
That's going to be a significant number because District 4 in itself probably has well over 100 personnel. Traffic Division is probably close to 100. So you got to imagine too, not only are we just distributing the cameras, in terms of the District 4, there's 3 stations, right? There's Kailua, Kaneohe, and Kahuku. So the stations are going to have to be outfitted and equipped for us to dock the cameras as well. So it's not just distributing. There's some type of hardware we would have to install, especially for the docking into these stations. So
Yeah, they have to set up the whole back room and everything.
yeah.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yes.
Chief, thanks a lot for the presentation, and in the short time that I've been on the commission, I wanted to echo Commissioner Broderick's statement about how just the use of the body-worn cameras, or the ability to see in real time from the officer's perspective what's happening, it's actually very, very helpful to the commission in terms of being able to determine how to evaluate the different complaints that come into the department. And I would say that often, or maybe even more often than not, it actually results in the commission making a determination as a group to not sustain a complaint because we're able to see firsthand what actually happened, and not just the emotion of what's being written within the complaint. So that's been very helpful. I think another comment that has come up previously amongst the commission with regards to body-worn camera is just the observation that when the body-worn camera is turned off by an officer, that there's a lack of an ability to evaluate what's happened. And I think the concern that's been raised by the commission before, that we just wanted to bring to your attention in case we didn't underscore it last time, is just that we wouldn't want officers to be faced with a choice where they realize they'd be better off turning off the camera and taking whatever small discipline would occur because they turned off the camera, that would then allow them to do whatever they wanted. And again, I use that very, very loosely. I'm not suggesting that everybody does whatever they want, but I'm talking about the rogue cop or the rogue police officer who makes that kind of poor decision. Unfortunately, that leaves the commission with a bad place, because then we can't sustain a complaint because we don't know, we can't say for sure what actually happened. Or we're left with that possibility that we might not sustain a complaint. And then the officer who has committed something bad gets away with it. Again, not suggesting that everybody who turns off their camera is trying to cover up something. Nothing like that at all. But I think the concern that we raised was that we're hopeful that that it can really be stressed to the officers, or there can be a very strong penalty beyond just a note to their file that they turned off their camera and were reprimanded or told not to do that anymore. So we just wanted to express that feedback to the department for their consideration.
Okay, noted. Thank you.
So, maybe some math. So 65 officers investigated over the whole course of the year.
That'll be correct.
Out of how many body worn cameras issued to, so how many officers have been provided body worn cameras?
It should be easy over 1,000, I would say, Commissioner. I
Okay.
can't give you an exact figure, but I would say it's gotta be at least over 1,000.
So can I ask an open-ended question? Has there been buy-in by the vast majority of the department, uniformed officers, that body worn cameras go on when you have an encounter and then they go off when they should go off?
Yeah, I would say there has been buy-in, but in terms of buying, I wanna say it probably equates to more of an acceptance of this is the equipment you have to use as well.
So what I would say, just an observation of the comments made by other commissioners, and it's the same that I have, is in the cases that we see, which is always just a tip of the iceberg of what actually goes on in the department, right? It's public complaints. When somebody actually turns off a camera and then turns it back on, turns it off again, there's almost like a presumption that there was something going on. So I guess what I'd say to the commissioners, fellow commissioners, is when we all agree it's kind of appropriate, it feels like we should formalize what is maybe in our heads already about that when enough training has occurred, you're seeing less, just mistaken, not turning on body-worn cameras type thing, is actually a presumption that there was a reason somebody turned off a camera. So that, I'm just gonna throw that out there. It's way premature to actually put that into place, but that's, I think some of the commissioners are coming from, including myself. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Chief Takasaki Young? Thank you very much, Chief, for the presentation. Appreciate it. And thank you for accommodating our request to push it to this meeting. Moving on in our agenda, legislative update on priority HPD bills. Or whatever Chief wants to take up next.
Okay, we can go with the legislative. So let me start out. One of the issues that all the police chiefs of the state of Hawaii, Maui, Big Island, Kauai, and myself, we wrote a letter as the police chiefs of Hawaii to the legislature regarding Senate Bill number 742. And this is one where they're trying to require the collection and public reporting of data of not only arrested persons, but the victims of crime as well. So what this is actually doing is that all this collection of data will be made public. So now the victim's address, where they live, their relationship to the suspect, let's say if it's a sex assault, and it's a familial type of sex assault. Now you're going to know what person in the family, where they live, their name, their age, their nationality, their ethnicity, all that's going to become public information. And on top of that, we're taking a look at this thing, and is that, why would people report a crime? So if I report a crime and my house is burglarized, my address now becomes not just a dot on a crime map in the general area. Now my address becomes public, along with my name, my age, my nationality, my occupation. All this stuff is going to become public record. So why would I want to report a crime and let people know where I live and what happened so that maybe somebody else can come there? In addition, our concern with this is that they're also they're asking us to collect data that we currently don't collect. So what this is going to do is our fear is we're going to basically have constitutional issues, because let's say that we stop somebody for failing to turn on their blinker, and we just warn them saying, hey, just want to let you know you need to, turn on your blinker. Well, we can no longer do that. Now we're going to have to spend 10 minutes with that person collecting all of their personal information, where they live, everything else. And once again, that is going to become public information. And on top of that, we do not have, I don't think any of the chiefs of police, any of the police departments have staffing that can be dedicated for inputting all of the statistical information and then doing any type of analysis or anything else. The resources just aren't there, especially now with the budget being the way that they are. And then, of course, we can't mandate it if there's no law that mandates it. So if we tell somebody, hey, we want to collect all this information, and they're going to go, well, I'm not going to give it to you, and then they just leave, of course, then now all the information, the data is going to be inaccurate, it's going to be incomplete, unless you now pass another law that mandates people, anytime a police officer has any contact with you whatsoever, that you are mandated to give this information to the police so that it can be made public in some type of statistical analysis. So we have written several letters of opposition to the legislature regarding this. My understanding is this bill is still moving forward. So on that, I'm going to call on each of the assistant chiefs. We get hundreds and hundreds of bills, but I've asked them to just highlight the ones that they feel is most important for their particular area. So I'm going to start with Central Patrol. So Chief Nishibun.
Thanks, Chief. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Okay. So the one bill that we're still following is House Bill 72, House Draft 2. This one deals with electric foot scooters. So just an overview, it just basically redefines a moped to exclude the electric foot scooter. So it takes it off from the moped. And then it also retains the personal injury protection benefits. So if a person on an electric foot scooter gets into a motor vehicle collision, he'd still be allowed the insurance benefits as any other person involved in a motor vehicle collision. The one thing with this one is, I guess in Waikiki, where it's more prevalent, you see a lot of those new GoX scooters going around. And right now, those things are treated as a moped because that's what it's classified as. So they're trying to pass it now where it gets redefined and taken out of the definition of a moped to a motor scooter, electric foot scooter. This one is still moving forward. The last hearing we had was on February 25th and it passed with flying colors. So it's moving.
Thank you.
Okay, next is going to be Regional Patrol. So Assistant Chief Nagata.
Chief Nagata, I think you're on mute.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
My bureau is following the fireworks bills. And for the fireworks bills this year, a lot of them propose raising fines, taxes, fees, and whatnot. And, we understand the importance of making stiffer penalties because it's important. It's the back end. But what really concerned us was House Bill 35. Unfortunately, House Bill 35 was deferred, but it's a shipping container inspection bill that tasked the Public Safety Department to take a look at the incoming shipping goods and to check for those illegal fireworks. And we processed and we participated in the hearings, but the bill was deferred because the bill encompassed a lot more broader aspects than what they thought. Because shipping goods to the state of Hawaii comes in most times by harbors 90%, but we didn't talk about the air. We didn't also talk about private shipping and private air cargo, right? And in addition to that, it would take more than just the public safety division. They would need to partner with customs, harbors, the airports, and the feds. And so what happened was they're tasked with going back to the drawing board and coming back with a bigger, better plan. And what we want to do is work with them and offer our support. Resources are limited, but it'll help us in the long run. Because to address the fireworks issue at the beginning is much better than just making stiffer penalties. But combined together, it's going to be much more meaningful and impactful.
Any questions for Chief Nagata? Sorry, I forgot to see if anyone had questions for Nishibun, Chief Nishibun. Any questions? I just had a comment. Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I didn't.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to thank you for HPD being on the record with respect to this. I know there's a lot of pushback from probably the shipping stakeholders as well because of the time, right, it would take probably to inspect. But I'm glad that perhaps maybe the feds will be coming in with respect to maybe allowing some resources on their end, because I think we forget about this during the months of, between November, now till maybe summer, but in our neighborhood, it's still going on. So I'm still very much hot on this issue. So Chief Nagata, I just appreciate the department being on the record. I don't know if anyone else has other comments. It's really affecting just ways of life. I mean, animals, not only animals, kupuna, all of us. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is going to be Assistant Chief Naito in charge of the Investigation Bureau.
Hi, aloha. Good afternoon, Chair Aliwato, Vice Chair Gibson, members of the Commission. Sean Naito again. I'm the Assistant Chief that oversees the Investigative Bureau, and that consists of our Criminal Investigation Division, Narcotics Vice Division, Traffic Division, Scientific Investigative Section, our Crime Lab, and our IU Intelligence and Enforcement Unit. The IB, or Investigative Bureau, has about 290 bills that are assigned to us. Some of the more notable ones in summary, the ones that we are tracking and watching and providing support and testimony in support or opposition. One that comes under CID is basically trying the bill. There's two bills relating to used motor vehicle parts, and this is to address specifically a recent rash of catalytic converter thefts. Basically, this bill is similarly written in both that it requires dealers who are purchasing it to get statement by the seller, as well as, and it requires specific information, ID, seller's information, etc., notarized statement by the seller, and also requires the seller to provide specific information, notarized statement, personal information, vehicle came from, and everything else. The bottom line is to summarize and to address the seriousness and the problem we've been having regarding, especially recently, with the theft of catalytic converters. The penalty would be treated as a Class C felony regarding that. The next one is the ones that fall under our Narcotics Vice Division, which is there's several bills relating to marijuana. Primarily, again, they want to increase the amounts allowable, possession of marijuana. There's a bill that is written that's going to be allowing the possession of currently 3 grams up to 1 ounce of marijuana that a person may possess in order to be considered a petty misdemeanor. In other words, they basically want to allow a larger amounts for possession or use. Something else on the Narcotics Vice Division, there are several bills that I'm sure you're all aware about, is the bills regarding legalized gambling, creating a state lottery. I think that bill is particularly to benefit some of the funds to go public education fund. And the second is state lottery division, which would be basically rulemaking authority to implement a lottery specifically. So again, obviously those bills we are against, in opposition against any form of legalized gambling, and of course the reasons, the associated social costs and everything else, and how that affects our community. Lastly, the traffic division, there are several bills, there are a couple of bills, both in the Senate and the House, regarding our OVUI laws regarding use of intoxicants while operating a motor vehicle. Primarily, those are trying to lower the threshold BAC or blood alcohol concentration from the current 0.08 to 0.05. I think we think that will drastically help and address the problem of OVUI. And even specifically, I think the most recent state that had lowered that threshold amount, they noted approximately, I think it was Utah, noticed approximately a 37% decrease in traffic-related fatalities associated with driving under influence. And anybody have any questions for me or regarding that? Try to keep it simple as possible.
Thank you so much, Chief Naito. Any questions? Seeing none, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is going to be Assistant Chief Chun in charge of the Support Services Bureau.
Hi, good afternoon. One of the bills that the department is supporting is House Bill 1366 as it relates to firearms. The bill strengthens the language of what's commonly referred to as the ghost gun law. And for your understanding, a ghost gun is basically a firearm, mainly the firearm receiver, which houses the trigger mechanism. And that is commonly fabricated using a three-dimensional printer that you can buy at the stores. The three-dimensional printer utilizes a computer-generated design and fabricates the part using additives like liquid plastics and fuses them together layer by layer, and the end result is a functional firearm receiver that is legal in some states and untraceable as it doesn't have any serial numbers or any other identifying marks. So Bill 1366 makes the current law even stronger by making possession of any firearm receiver that's not imprinted with a legally registered serial number. It makes it illegal. While supporting that part of the bill, we opposed any amendments that would allow possession prior to the initial law's effective date of September 15, 2020, as it would be extremely difficult to really ascertain when it was constructed or acquired. And that's what is the loophole right now. So after the first draft was proposed and we provided a testimony, HB 1366 HD1 came out on February 25th, and it removed the section of our opposition. So that was really good for us. So we are supporting the HD1 version that makes possession illegal and takes out any specifics on any applicable timelines. And a violation of this law would be a Class C felony, 5-year imprisonment, and a $10,000 fine.
Thank you very, very much, Chief Chun. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
And the next is going to be Assistant Chief Mann in charge of the Special Field Operations.
Hello, good afternoon. As stated, I'm in charge of the Special Field Operations Bureau. I have one bill that I'd like to highlight, and it's very important to the department. Senate Bill 726 relating to policing. It prohibits no-knock warrants, requires a wait time of 30 seconds prior to entry, and the wearing of the uniform when serving a warrant. We are in opposition of this bill. HRS 80337 already requires us to announce our office and purpose for being there prior to entering a closed door. And this is our standard operating procedure. But the requirement to wait 30 seconds before entry is concerning. We currently base the delay of entry on the totality of the circumstances, meaning exigent circumstances and safety concerns of all involved. By requiring a wait of 30 seconds, you're basically removing our ability to respond reasonably to the demands of the situation, which may require immediate police response. Basically removing a tool we currently have to ensure the safety of our officers and others both in the house and in the surrounding area, prevent the escape of a suspect and or the destruction of evidence. There's really no one-size-fits-all when it comes to setting a minimum wait time. Again, the totality of the circumstances, suspect background, known to be armed, violent, size of the house, time of day, etc. And finally, as I said earlier, another part of it is the wearing of a uniform. we are fine with that. We are required to be wearing uniforms now, but we have many different uniforms within the department. Patrol and SSD both are in uniform, but their uniforms look totally different. So that's something that we've addressed thus far in our testimony and will continue to address. And that's it.
Thank you, Chief Mann. Any questions for Chief Mann? Yes, Commissioner Brown, Perry.
Chief, are you saying that right now you must announce before you enter? Is that the current law?
Yeah, Hawaii revised statutes.
Okay.
803-37 requires us to announce our presence and the reason for being there before we enter a closed door.
Okay, and so then you can just announce and go straight in right now?
The way it's written, yes, but it has to be reasonable. So that, again, the totality of the circumstances. And but we could, the way the law is written now, yes.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you.
Any further questions for Chief Mann? Thank you very much, Chief. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone. And then the last thing I have is just to touch on the resolution that they brought forward, the City Council brought forward regarding the audit for overtime. We look forward to it because I think it's going to be an educational thing for the commission, as well as the council and the public, because overtime is not just strictly from HPD. It's gotten from our special duty, it's gotten from grants. There's different ways that officers can earn overtime, and it's pretty much given out, and all this is basically in the hands of the commanders, and to make sure that it's done fairly across the board. So we're looking forward to it, and of course, if there's any way that we can improve what we're doing, then that would be great. I mean, as I said before, we've already and we had been working on a system so that now that the officer or the commanders get a report every week for every officer in their division as to what overtime that they have worked. We're still working on looking at a cap, not just because right now we have a cap for special duty, we have a cap for grant overtime, but we're looking at putting all that together and having a cap across the board. Of course, because we're concerned about the fatigue of the officers, and then of course officer safety if they're, working too much so that, they're unable to, really protect themselves and the public. So that's the end of my report, unless you have any questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Broderick.
Chief, I just had a question. It's a general question about legislation. What is the internal process for the department deciding whether to propose legislation? And what is the internal process for the department deciding what position to take on legislation that has been introduced?
So as far as what legislation is introduced by the department, it's if we see that there's a weakness in a law or there's something that we want to address. So like last year, we were the ones I think put forward like the ghost gun legislation to tighten up things like auto theft. Now they won't charge people if they have, if they've got the keys to the car, even though they might have stolen the keys. So it just all depends upon each of the commanders of each of their divisions. They recommend any changes to their assistant chief, and then the legislation is written. We actually have a legislative liaison office. It sounds like it might have a lot of people, but in actuality, it's got like 2 people there. And then what happens as far as what we support or oppose, all the people who work in the legislative office. So anytime there's a bill that comes out, they are charged with reading the bill, and then each division is responsible for some general area as far as anything that might be relating to policing. And then those bills are forwarded to those divisions. They take a look at it, they see if there's any impact on the department, and then they make a recommendation to their assistant chief whether to oppose, support, or just sometimes it could just be monitor. And then it goes up to the deputy chiefs, and then the testimony is written and reviewed, and then I'll sign the final testimony before it goes over.
Great, that's really helpful. Just one question. Do you have the ultimate say in terms of what the position is of the department?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioner Okinawa?
Thank you, Chief. Thank you for the presentation by you and all the other chiefs. So, one of the questions I was asked by Councilmember Say, I think, was the commission's willingness to testify in opposition to bills that were introduced at the legislature that had severe cost implications for the department or additional responsibilities. In the listing that I heard, and I'm sure it's probably some of the descriptions being generous, but I didn't really hear that. So increased, so for example, most recent one I remember talking about was the rail unit. But for example, are there bills out there that are still alive that would result in increased responsibilities for the department where there isn't any funding associated with it?
Yeah, there's two of them. I'm sure there's more than two, but two of them that stick out in my mind is one, the registration of the electric gun, the tasers. So they initially were trying to make the police departments, all the county police departments register these electric guns that they're going to make legal or available or whatever to everybody, similar to what we do with firearms. Well, you see where we're at with trying to register firearms. 3 months out, in 90 days, every 90 days, everything is filled up. We don't have the staffing, resources, or anything else to do something like that. My understanding from that bill is our recommendation that we wrote back saying, of course, we opposed the initial bill, but we are saying that we would support a bill that would require the registration of these electric guns, similar to what they currently do with oleocapsicum pepper spray. Thank you. Instead of me butchering that, pepper spray. So that the stores that would be selling the electric guns, they would have to have a license to sell, and then they would be responsible for doing an education course for the people who buy the electric gun, as well as register those. So in case they're used in a crime, as you know, that when you use an electric gun, these little graffiti thingies come out all over and they're everywhere. So to try and pick them up is going to take you a long time. And then you would, they all have a number embedded on there, and then from that number, we could go to a database that they would be required to put all this information in and to find out who has that gun. So there's that one, and then of course the one that I just talked about, Senate Bill number 742 relating to policing, the collecting of the data, inputting of the data, and analyzing of the data. We don't have the expertise, nor do we have the resources or staffing to do anything like that. So those two, unless the deputies, you have anything that stick out.
The first one you talked about just passed with our amendments.
Okay, so Chief McCarthy said the first one with the electric gun did pass with our amendments, so that's a good thing. And if there's anything else, we can ask our assistant chiefs and whatnot in LLO. And if there's any others that require additional funding or resources, then we'll be more than happy. We can send that to Commissioner Olivato, and then she can get that information out to you if that's okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions for Chief? Commissioner Park.
Yeah, I was wondering, Chief, around the COVID enforcement team overtime investigation. I saw your presentation on Facebook, and I was wondering, is that the extent of the public reporting on the issue?
Yes, as far as what we have right now, obviously we still have the 4 officers who the case was declined by the Attorney General, but that the administrative investigation is still ongoing. And then there's an additional 7 that we're just looking at because some things just didn't match up. And of course, if they get any discipline that's 1-day suspension or more, obviously they will be on the legislative log at that point.
Okay. One of the things I noticed in your discussion was that you didn't really talk about the why. Why did this occur? Why did 15% of the officers think it was okay to violate the policy?
To be very blunt, their commanders told them it was okay to do it.
Why did that happen?
I can't tell you what their reasoning was for doing it. I can say that in general, the one or two lower ones that I've talked to, they were, I guess they were really, they wanted to go out and they wanted to do what they needed to do. And they felt that the people who signed up for it, that there were a lot of people who did not sign up to work it. And so they still needed to fill those slots. And if they couldn't fill them with people who had not signed up or didn't want to sign up, then they went back to the people who were already working it and were doing good enforcement. So they just figured, well, they were trying to reach the goal that we were trying to do, which was, educate the public and obviously, citations if they failed to comply with the emergency orders. Other than that, I don't know, because that is still an ongoing thing, as far as what with the supervisors.
So you're saying the supervisors basically cajoled the officers into working the overtime because the supervisors felt that that was a requirement on them? Is that what you're saying?
No, I think they just felt that they got 10 slots that they needed to fill all 10. But they knew what the rules were because the notice came out as far as the procedures that no officer could work more than 24 hours in 1 week. It was their choice, I'm assuming, because they did it, to allow them to go beyond. As a saying, it would be, and we hear from the officers, well, the commander said that we could, or my supervisor said we could, but it's the same thing. We tell them, well, somebody brought up, this is a good example. Matter of fact, it was Chief Takasaki Young. If your commander said that you could come in with a beard and earrings and nose rings, would you do it? And they're like, well, no. Well, how come? Well, because you can't. Well, how is this any different? You knew that you couldn't do it, so you shouldn't have done it to begin with. So I don't know. I cannot tell you what their thinking was, other than their thinking was flawed. And, it was just, and they're going to be counseled because of it. They're going to,
So can you just explain what, I noticed you said that there's going to be divisional counseling. What does that mean? What does that entail?
It means that they get, it's what we call a 384. It's a written counseling. It goes into their divisional file.
Okay. And the supervisors likewise?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that we're doing more and more is we are holding our supervisors accountable, whether it's the sergeants, whether it's the lieutenants, the captains, or the majors. So if they do something wrong, it's not just going to be the officers, because if they had control of the situation and they made a bad choice, they're going to be held accountable as well, which has not ever happened really in the past administrations.
And the 11 officers who you said there's questions around whether they actually work the overtime. So
I cannot say. It's still under investigation.
So I guess I was puzzled by the fact that 4 of them got sent to the prosecutor's office if you're still investigating them.
Yes, 4 of them got sent because we had witnesses who saw them leave early. And so because of that, we had what we felt, had probable cause. So those were sent to the Attorney General. And so the other 7 that are in that group, there was not witnesses to it, but there was some questions, so that we are doing a more thorough investigation on those 7 officers.
And so the 4 where you do have evidence, has disciplinary action been taken against those officers?
As far as the criminal side, no, because the AGs chose to decline prosecution on that. So what happens is that we have 2 sides of our PSO. We have the criminal side and we have the administrative side. So if there's not a criminal nexus, or there's not a criminal complaint or whatever, anyway, the criminal is out because the AG's dumped it. So now they're going to be charged underneath our standards of conduct for whatever is applicable to their particular case, which is what we call the administrative. Now the administrative investigation is going to be ongoing, and whatever, and of course they have the right to be heard. They have, the Loudermill hearing, and then the ARB will, excuse me, make a recommendation as to what their discipline is, or if they're found, or if they find it not sustained, and then it comes to me for final sign off.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Uh-huh.
Vice Chair Gibson and then Commissioner Browder.
Chief, was the 24-hour rule known by the commanders, was that also known by all the rank and file?
Yes, it was.
Thank you.
Just a follow-up, Chief, based on just the findings that you folks did internally, do you feel like it was more of a miscommunication, that maybe perhaps they were the officers who actually did, exceed that limit, whether there was just a miscommunication within the administration and the commanders where, they were told fill those slots, so go ahead and fill it. I think that's what concerns the public the most. I think we can all agree that the enforcement was effective in ensuring the safety of our community during that heightened time. But what was it something internal that I think what we want to know going forward will not occur again with respect to overtime? So sorry, it's kind of a mixed bag question, but just wondering if you have a response to that.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, obviously, when our policies and procedures and notices come out, that's the rule. They have to follow it. So I think, if anything, the miscommunication or the wrong communication was given to the officers from the command or from their supervisors. So and it's just like anything. As we move forward, we will, when we send out a notice, we will once again remind the assistant chiefs, and they'll remind their commanders that they are to follow. It's the same thing as what we have now when we have a limit as far as what they can work for grant overtime and for special duty. And they still violate that, but we catch it and then they're investigated and they're not allowed to work for a month, 2 months, 3 months, or whatever. To stop it completely, we developed a computer program, but there's so many different pots, I guess, or areas where you can work overtime that it's not like we can just cut it off. So that's why we send it to the commanders. That is the major and the captain's responsibility. It is their district. They're responsible for taking a look at these reports that are sent to them and making sure that their officers are doing what they're supposed to be doing. It all comes down to them, because we and the assistant chiefs can't be looking at every single officer as to what they're doing. That's why we have the command staff that we have. And then it's their responsibility to hold their lieutenants and sergeants, responsible all the way down the line. So would something like the CET happen again? I can tell you with absolute certainty that would not. Would they go over, say, if we set a 24-hour limit per week for any overtime? Of course, there's going to be some exceptions, because it's not as simple as just saying that 24 hours of overtime, because if they go and work grant overtime, then they get court. So if they go over 24 hours, I can't tell them, hey, you cannot go to court. Court is mandatory. You have to go to court. So if they're out there doing arrest and they're doing citations or whatever, they have to go to court. So there may be times when they exceed the 24 hours. But that is up to the command, that they have to justify why it is that they went over the limit at whatever we set. So it's not as simple as just A to B to C. It's a gamut. It's a very complex way of earning money here at HPD.
Thank you. I see Commissioner Broderick.
Chief, just one. How, if at all, has the overtime matter impacted the morale of the department?
Well, this whole thing with morale, yeah, they're not happy because they got written up because they were told by their commanders that they could work. But once again, it goes back to they're responsible for knowing what they can and cannot do. you know, it's no different than out on the road. If their sergeant tells them, oh, go arrest that guy, and you don't have a reason to arrest him, that officer better step up and say, no, we're not going to do that, or question it, especially when they know that there's a directive that's available. So yeah, they're not happy. And they don't understand, but, you know, try to explain to them that they are responsible and they are going to be held responsible, as well as whatever supervisor that did it. I mean, anytime you have discipline investigations, people aren't happy. I mean, you know, never mind. I just, that's it.
But I would assume that the rest of the department's very pleased that the matter has been come to a resolution and you can move on from here.
Oh yeah, definitely. Even the officers who were involved, I think they're just relieved because they didn't know what was going to happen to them either, or what was going on. So I think, yeah, relief is probably a better term than morale.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Chief and Chief's report? Seeing none, thank you, Chief. Moving on our agenda, approval of the minutes for the open session of February 3rd, 2021.
I would move for the approval of the minutes for the open session of February 3, 2021.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion with respect to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor by roll call, Chair votes aye, Vice Chair.
Aye.
Commissioner Okinaga.
Aye.
Commissioner Chin.
Aye.
Commissioner Perry.
Aye.
And Commissioner Broderick.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Moving on to new business, report on actions taken at the executive session of January 20th, 2021. Commissioner Okinaga.
Thank you. During the executive session of January 20, 2021, Commissioners approved the December 16, 2020 executive session minutes and took action on 5 complaints involving 8 officers. First, HPC number 20-063 involved 1 complainant and 1 officer. The complaint of discourtesy, harsh remarks was not sustained. Second, HPC number 20-090 involved 1 complainant and 1 officer. The complaints of discourtesy, profanity, and overbearing conduct were sustained. Third, HPC number 20-093 involved 1 complainant and 1 officer. The complaints of discourtesy, profanity, and conduct unbecoming an officer were not sustained. Fourth, HPC number 20-088 involved 1 complainant and 3 officers. The complaints of discourtesy, profanity, and excessive use of force against 1 officer were sustained. The complaints of unnecessary use of force and mistreatment against 2 officers were not sustained. Fifth, HPC number 20-089 involves 1 complainant and 2 officers. The complaints of discourtesy, profanity, and unnecessary use of force were not sustained. The complaint of threatening against 1 officer was sustained. The Commission accepted the recommendation of the executive officer and closed HPC 20-115 without further investigation pursuant to Honolulu Police Commission Rule 9-1B. The Commission also held a contested case hearing for former Officer Derek Hahn for USDC Civil Number 16-00659 on January 20, 2021. After discussion, Commissioners voted to deny legal counsel for former Officer Derek Hahn. Findings of fact, conclusions of law, and decision and order was issued. I move to accept this report.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, by roll call vote, Chair votes aye, Vice Chair.
Aye.
Commissioner Okinaga.
Aye.
Commissioner Chin.
Aye.
Commissioner Perry.
Aye.
And Commissioner Broderick.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Moving on, Salary Commission as under new business. I requested that this agenda item be listed only because the Salary Commission just recently came out with a recommendation. And per news reports and in getting a report from the Salary Commission, at this time they are not recommending any salary increase for any city official. I think what the commission would have wanted to consider is whether or not there would be a discussion with respect to requesting the commission to consider the chief's salary and ensuring that it is competitive with on national standards. But at this time, given the recommendation by the Salary Commission, is it okay that we take no action with respect to this issue? Seeing nodding of heads, we will not be taking a position with respect to the Salary Commission that just delivered their permitted interaction group report recently. So with that, I'll move on to unfinished business. First up is Chief of Police evaluation for 2020. As reported last meeting, we are on schedule with respect to Chief's evaluation. Today, we are expected to receive Chief's personal self-evaluation in executive session and have further discussion. We will continue to be open to receiving information from the public with respect to Chief's performance in 2020. And we just thank everyone for their participation. Any further discussion on Chief's evaluation? Seeing none, moving on to the report from the Permitted Interaction Group formed on November 4th pursuant to HRS 92-2.5 subsection B1 to review and make recommendations on the Honolulu Police Department's FY 21-22 budget. And at this time, I just have a few words to open it up to the Permitted Interaction Group. First, before we start, on behalf of the Commission, we would like to thank the Permitted Interaction Group volunteer members who stepped up to the plate to undertake further review of the department's budget to determine whether the Commission would have any recommendations for the mayor to consider. Commissioner Chin led the team together with Vice Chair Gibson and Commissioner Perry. Thank you very much for your efforts. I will provide some background as to the Commission's role in the review of the department's budget, then ask Commissioner Chin to provide an overview of the report, copies of which may be available after today's meeting. Pursuant to Section 6-1606 of the Honolulu Charter that governs the Commission and its powers, duties, and functions, the Police Commission shall, subsection B, review the annual budget prepared by the Chief of Police and make recommendations thereon to the mayor, and may make recommendations. To recap, at its November 4th, 2020 regular meeting, the Honolulu Police Commission unanimously voted to form a Permitted Interaction Group pursuant to Section 92-2.5 subsection B1 of the Hawaii Revised Statutes. The Permitted Interaction Group was assigned to review and make recommendations on the Honolulu Police Department's FY 21-22 budget. As a reminder to all commissioners, after the Permitted Interaction Group has made its report to the Commission, members may ask Permitted Interaction Group members clarifying questions about the report and the investigation with no discussion permitted. Please remember the Commission cannot engage in any deliberations or decision-making at this meeting. The Sunshine Law requires that deliberation and decision-making, if any, must occur at the next committee meeting where we will take up this issue again, and it will be properly agendized as well. We will now hear from the Permitted Interaction Group on its findings and recommendations. Thank you.
Chair Alabado, thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to present this 7-page report to the Commission for their consideration and review. I wanted to be able to make a few observations about what the process was like for the Permitted Interaction Group, then just touch upon what the recommendations are that came out of the group's review, and then also talk about how these recommendations might be useful to the mayor with regards to the HPD's 21 and 22 budget. As the Commission is aware, there was an audit that came out just in the last couple months that identified some of the, took note of the Commission's advisory powers and found that a more detailed review of the Commission's functions might be warranted. And one of the issues identified by the auditor for potential review was whether or how the Commission was using its advisory powers and whether the Commission was meeting its charter mandate to provide advisory reviews and exercise oversight of the police department. So this is a bit of an attempt to try to address some of the potential concerns that were raised by the auditor as far as what the Commission was doing. In looking over or in checking with the Commission staff, we weren't able to find a report that was this formal, that was done by previous generations of the Honolulu Police Commission. That's not at all to suggest that the Commission wasn't keeping up with their charter mandate or that they weren't making recommendations to the mayor verbally or in other ways that they might have been able to talk about the budget. But we didn't actually have a template to be able to work from. And so with that, I think we were able to go into this with fresh eyes but also we were able to make a couple observations, so I'll make them now. One of the things that we noticed right off the bat, and I want to thank very much Vice Chair Gibson and Commissioner Perry for their heavy involvement in this, and the fact that the group was able to work together so cohesively, but also just very collaboratively. But I think one of the things that we saw right off the bat was that none of us are finance experts in terms of being able to look at the budget, and we didn't really see that our place was to make recommendations to the mayor in terms of, for example, you should take $1,000 from this special fund and move it into this general fund, and that's what you ought to do. It seems like those duties or those responsibilities really rest in the capable hands of the great employees at the Department of Budget and Fiscal Services, as well as, frankly, the City Council and their staff and the people who will then be examining the mayor's budget and making recommendations from there. I know that Commissioner Broderick is aware that when I was up for confirmation that I made a big deal about how I can read and understand the city's budget, including HPD's budget. And I quickly realized that it's one thing to read and understand the budget when it's your full-time job to do so. And it's another thing when you have a full-time job and you're trying to do this in a volunteer capacity. And so I think we as much as we appreciated the chief allowing us to get a chance to be able to speak to the finance leadership in the department, that was super useful and really helped us to be able to kind of form our recommendations. We also realized that getting too much into the weeds in terms of what we would be recommending might not really have been what the charter mandate was, what the charter was contemplating when it was saying that the citizen group was going to be making recommendations to the mayor about what could be done with the budget. So that kind of informed where our recommendations were going. And then I think the other thing that we saw as we were going through this process was just kind of understanding our lane and realizing that we are citizens that are playing an advisory role in this. And one of the things that I always remember about what commission members are, whether they're the police commission or salary commission or anything, is that they're supposed to be the eyes and ears of the mayor or the council or the city, just in terms of being able to reflect back what is the feedback and what's the what are they hearing from the public as they're engaging in their roles. And so one of the things that we saw, not just from talking from stakeholders, but just going through each and every one of the agenda items that took place in 2020, which we've listed out in this report, is how often budget items came up in front of the commission. Whether it was just actual budget allocations or mismanagement of the budget or alleged mismanagement of the budget. Certainly overtime, as you'll see, that became a big issue and was even a big issue that got discussed and will be on our agenda today as something in the minutes, as something that the commission had to face. And so I think that perspective helped us realize that this is an opportunity for our group that faces this responsibility or takes on this mantle to be able to hear from the public and to be more sensitive to what's happening to the department. It gives us a chance to be able to put this down into writing or summarize it in a way that can be able to make certain recommendations to the mayor. So with that, we did come up with two areas that we were going to ask the mayor and the department to consider as it was preparing for this year's budget. One of those areas had to do with overtime. And it's only appropriate that we spend so much time just right now talking about overtime in this agenda, just to show how that was really an issue that I think for those of us who've been involved in the city for a long time, we realize it's a perennial issue for the police department, but also it became of particular importance during 2020 with some of the investigations and allegations that occurred during that time. So with that, I'm not going to go through this. I think this is a report that will be available to the public, but we made several recommendations, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that observations being made that overtime is such a significant percentage of the department's budget. It's often something that officers here tend to or come to rely upon as part of their salary package or as part of something that helps them with their retirement. And so a lot of our numerous recommendations had to do with trying to address those different areas of concern and to raise different suggestions about what the mayor or the department might try to look at. But I think then the other area, the second area that we talked about was having an additional consideration of an opportunity to be able to restructure some of the department's functions, whether it was looking into ways that the department could be able to take some of its responsibilities and have other social services or human services groups or agencies get a chance to be able to take on those responsibilities, or ways that the department could restructure itself to be able to handle some of those issues that have been of more sensitivity to the public. And so with that, we came up with several different recommendations. Most of it involves establishing a task force of people who know more than we do and are more aware of what the actual nitty-gritty is, details of how something like this could even possibly happen, for them to be able to consider whether any sort of restructuring, any sort of moving, as the chief has talked about before, moving 21st century policing and just the lessons that have been learned in society into an older structure that has been around for such a long time. So with that, that's where our two recommendations came from. One was for overtime, and one had to do with the restructuring of the department. I want to add that there was a media report about restructuring the department and talking about social services. I just want to say we didn't just write this report 2 days ago. I mean, this is a draft that's been around for several weeks and that we've been working on. So if anything, there was a consistency in terms of what the commission was seeing and just what's being echoed out there in the public domain. So then, as far as whether these recommendations are doable, whether they're realistic, whether they are adequate in considering union issues or budget issues or complexities, I think one of the things that we realized, and just to put this in perspective, is that as a commission of citizens who are giving advice, we're gonna leave that to the capable hands of the chief and her leadership, the mayor and the administration and the people to be able to decide what they can do with these. But I think if we can at least, again, trying to understand what this report would be like, if we can at least be reflect, kind of what's the public lens in terms of what we're seeing bubble up to us, in terms of what we're hearing, then we were thinking that these recommendations might be things that are useful for the department to look at. And then finally, in terms of how the mayor or the city is going to be able to take these recommendations and incorporate them in the 21-22 budget. I'm more than aware that the mayor just unveiled his budget yesterday, and I think we were talking about how the timetable of this was very important to see that we were able to get this to the mayor in time for him to be able to act on it. I go back to someone that a very strong mentor to me when I became managing director in 2010. His name is Bob Fishman. He was the managing director for Mayor Harris back in 2000. And one of the things that he sat down with me when he showed me the budget is he said, "You're looking at a bunch of numbers, Doug, but ultimately the budget is a policy document. Like everything that is in here is a statement of policy. It is the city, it's the mayor, and it's the chief, the police chief, it's the department saying, this is what's important to us, and this is what's not important to us." And that's what it's really saying. So I think that even though the recommendations that we're making are such broad brush strokes, and the mayor has put out so much, he's already put out his budget, and the city council is about to consider it, there is still plenty of opportunity for these more policy type considerations to be incorporated into a budget. I mean, I think the mayor certainly has his own powers to release money or not release money contingent upon certain things happening. The city council is more than capable of putting in budget provisos and things like that in order to be able to see that their policies take place. And of course, then ultimately it comes down to actual funding and numbers that come through. So we do think that the report, even the way it's written, and even with the timing that we have, that it can still be useful for the city, and we hope it is. We hope that it's it's taken with the, we're not suggesting that it's full of expert advice, but we do feel that as a group we have the opportunity to be able to be exposed to as much of this as we can, and we want to be able to share this as the charter allows us to do so. And so lastly, I just want to thank the Commission for allowing us to be able to present this report. Again, this, I think the group came up with this. This was very much a consensus document, and we're grateful for the chance to be able to put this in front of the Commission for its consideration.
Is it possible for us to get a copy of that report?
Of course. Yes.
Yeah, maybe. We'd love to share. We'd love to share with the chief too.
You kind of forgot about it.
Yeah, we'd love to share it with the chief too.
We will.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the overview.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions that commission members have? Again, we'll be agendizing this report at the next meeting, and there will be opportunity for questions and deliberation and decision making at that time if this body of wants to do so. So seeing none, we'll be moving on the agenda. Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much, Commissioner Chin, Commissioner Perry, and Vice Chair Gibson.
Yes, thank you.
This is a great undertaking.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to Executive Officer's Report.
Thank you, Chair. As of March 1st, we have a total of 17 cases for this year. Breakdown of the cases, 14 in January, 3 in February. So we've seen a decline based on that. Of the 17, 10 are pending, and the remainder were referred to PSO.
Any office or personnel report?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we're setting up interviews for the investigator position. We plan to have it at the, tentatively set for the 30th and 31st of this month. And that completes my report.
Oh, thank you so much. Any questions for Mr. Yuen? Seeing none, moving on our agenda. This brings us to the executive session. If we could consider a motion to go into executive session.
So moved. Sorry, it's not my turn. Oh, you didn't put anything.
Could I I can't volunteer, so if someone would take us into executive session.
Just read it.
Yes, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
The following agenda.
We were all stalling to see who went first.
I know you were. The following agenda items will be reviewed in executive session pursuant to HRS 92-5A, subsections 2, 4, 5, 6, and 8. To consider the hire, evaluation, dismissal, or discipline of an officer or employee, or if charges brought against the officer or employee where consideration of matters affecting privacy will be involved. To consult with its attorneys on questions and issues pertaining to the board's powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities. To investigate proceedings regarding criminal misconduct. To consider sensitive matters relating to public safety or security. To deliberate or make a decision upon a matter that requires the consideration of information that must be kept confidential pursuant to state or federal law or a court order. During this meeting, there may be discussion with the chief of police and her staff regarding internal strategies and sensitive criminal investigation matters related to public safety. The disclosure could significantly risk the circumvention of law and undermine the effectiveness of the public's protection by the police. So I move we move into executive session.
Thank you. Any second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, by roll call vote, all those in favor of going into executive session, say aye. Chair votes aye, Vice Chair.
Aye.
Commissioner Okinaga.
Aye.
Commissioner Chin.
Aye.
Commissioner Perry.
Aye.
And Commissioner Broderick.
Aye.
Thank you very much. We will be moving into executive session. To members of the public and all the assistant chiefs joining us, thank you so very much for your participation today. We'll be signing off of WebEx.